Hello, everybody. Happy Monday.
Woo!
We are super excited to be back here and talking with you all today. I don't know about you guys, but January is my favorite month, and it's not just because it's my birthday month, but it might be a little bit. But it's also
Nice.
because we are talking about revisions and getting into our stories, writing, revising, plot holes, and all sorts of good stuff. I love it. Plus, I pantsed my first draft of The City of Snow and Stars during the month of January, so it holds a very special place in my heart. And we're very, very excited to be helping you guys here this month, this year, working on your goal of publishing your book. That is one of the goals that we're hoping to help you guys out with this year. So, just as a reminder, resources are down in the show notes. So go down, check out the show notes. There's links there. That has links to the writing templates, to worksheets, and to a revisions template specifically, along with the story timeline chart. Like, there's lots of good stuff that we have there for you guys, and there's going to be stuff continually added over time. A couple of other fun announcements for you is that we are going to be having an audience building boot camp coming up here very soon. I believe it's next week. It's scheduled on our channel. So if you go to the main channel page, you'll see all of the upcoming live streams that we have. There's some great stuff, you guys. So if you haven't checked that out, I highly recommend it. And also, if you haven't, make sure that you go down and you hit the subscribe button and the bell notification icon. So that way you guys know when we go live and when the uploads start a coming, because we've got so much content planned to make for you guys this year. It's going to be fantastic. So there's all of that fun stuff. Now, let's dive into the nitty-gritty of revising plots. So one of the things that we talked about back in December was doing developmental edits, okay? And the developmental edits is looking at the broad picture, the big picture of your book, pacing, plot holes, character arcs, all that kind of stuff. So as you start going through all of those revisions, there's going to be a couple of things that you're going to run into that you want to make sure that you correct / avoid altogether, because it does not help you at all. The first one is the implausible character actions. And so what that means is that you establish the character very early on in your book, and then you have them do something really, really stupid later on that is counter to how you establish them. So that is one of the things that I have seen with, especially with newer authors, especially like when I was on Wattpad more often, I would see this a lot in that you could tell, like, as the episode was progressing or the book chapter was progressing, suddenly the character would just turn on a dime, and it's like, what just happened? Like, that is completely against what the character was for or against at the beginning of the book. And then it just causes so much reader confusion. So you want to make sure to avoid that and look out for those things specifically. And I ran into the same thing between draft 1 and 2 of my book, and especially between draft 2 and 3, because so much of my world building had to be implemented and changed that I had to be very, very careful that culturally Trinia was making decisions that reflected her culture and not like some weird amalgamation of everyone else's later on in the book. So that is something to be careful about. One of the other things is too many words. Authors, and I find this especially true with fellow fantasy authors and science fiction authors, is that we get wordy. and it's because we like big books, and we don't hide that, but it doesn't have to be wordy. So, you know, a good goal to set for yourself, really, especially if you're thinking of like, hey, I kind of want to go the traditional publishing route, aim for 80,000 words, because I guarantee you, you're probably not going to land anything over that for a brand new author trying to get a book published traditionally. So you want to kind of work with that goal in mind. The other thing too is that your paragraphs should really be a maximum of 120 words, maximum. And the sweet spot for it is anywhere between 75 and 100. You can have something shorter than that, but the sweet spot is right in that 75 to 100. The maximum you want to go is about 120. And this is because once you format it, it looks very, very different once you get it formatted. And rather than having like a Council of Elrond sized paragraph on a single page that takes up like half the page, don't do that. Tolkien can get away with that. We cannot get away with that. People's attention span far too short. So don't be wordy. The other aspect of it is overlapping information that negates each other or conflicting information. So, you know, if you say like, well, everybody in this country, again, speaking of fantasy, everybody in this particular country does this. And then like 3/4 of the way through the book, you have another character that says, yeah, this country does this. Same country, same people groups, but two completely opposite perspectives. And wrong. Because now the reader's just like, but you said earlier about the thing. And now this guy's saying the thing is different than the thing that you said earlier. And my expectation was based on that thing. And now this thing contradicts the other thing. You don't want to confuse readers like that because they just get angry. And that's a great way to lose a reader. You know, Vincent, you've done historical fiction.
Yeah.
And so like, that's even more important that you don't have contradicting information.
True. True.
Because you're basing your stuff in real world.
Yeah.
Based off actual historical context. So like, it's even more important for what it is that you're doing.
Yes. And revisions are nice because it's finally the time you get to pick apart and see when you've done that, because almost guaranteed you're going to have a mistake like that somewhere. And it's nice to be able to look back and go, okay, I may have had this explanation or this motivated character decision in my head, but did it really come across on the page? I don't know. Better make sure it did.
Yep, absolutely. And that part in particular plays very heavily into the logical inconsistencies that are bound to take place. I already know. I'm writing book 2, The City of Stone and Sorrow, right now. And I can already tell that I'm going to have just a booger of a time with the timeline. Because like I did with the first one, I didn't write down the dates. I was just like, I just need to write. But now, because there are very specific timelines, we're in the middle of winter when it starts out, sometime in January. But the problem with that is that I have spanned at least 2 to 4 weeks, but I don't know where exactly I am at in time. I just know that winter. That's it. So I know that when I go back, I'm going to have to write down the dates and the amount of time that actually passes between chapters, because that is a consistency issue that I know I'm already going to run into. And I've stopped myself from doing that at least until I've finished the first draft of book 2. Otherwise, it's going to be bad. So that's one of the things that you want to look at. Also with the character arcs, that's another issue that you want to make sure that you're doing. And then overall, just kind of beefing up the story. And we can always circle back around to some of that stuff if everybody has questions about that later. But now I want to turn it over to Vincent here and have him kind of go into, again, what we do as coaching calls. And then we're going to bring on our special guest. So Vincent, take it away.
Yeah. So first and foremost, we're authors, as it says by Stephen's name. And I added the coach to mine, which he's also one. So what do? We have other authors that are going through similar process that we did, that we successfully finished. And if they have any questions, if they want advice on revisions, on editing, on marketing the book, at any phase of the process, we'll have a one-on-one session with them, talk through their topics that they're interested in, refer them to other resources that we've done, send it to them, learn about them and their specific issue and topic, and figure out the best solutions. And a lot of times those questions are already answered by the experiences that other authors have gone through, including our own. We can pull from our own experiences and talk to them about that as well. And so one of the guests that we have on today has similar experience as an author coach. And it's quite an honor to be able to talk with other authors and help them through the process, because you can feel kind of stuck at certain times, or you can feel lost. And it's really nice to have a reminder that other people are going through that process, and to actually have some solid answers too. To not just blow smoke, to actually have actionable items to give you, some resources that you feel you can put into practice and have them work most of the time. That's really useful and valuable. So that's what we try to do as author coaches, and we try to provide that for people one-on-one in larger groups, and the coaching calls is more the one-on-one type of situation. So yes, so the guest that's coming on today is Zara Miller. She's a published author, a writer, and a blogger, and her debut young adult novel called I Am Cecilia attracted the eye of prominent speaking conferences, which is a big deal, such as the Career Grad Festival and the Association of Writers and Writing Programs. She writes currently for the Teen Magazine, where she handles culture and student sections, and she works for her publishing house as an author coach and guiding new talent towards publishing successfully, like we just talked about. So yes, so Zara has that sort of experience. She also has good business acumen. So
hey.
Hiya. Hey y'all.
Hey.
How's everyone doing?
Good. We're doing good, and super glad to have you on here, Zara, to answer some questions and provide some valuable insights, for people who are going to be watching this later on or who are watching right now. I know that you've prepared a couple of questions, and I want to dive into those right away, so that way we can get to any additional questions that come up. So first and foremost, the question that you had posed was, if a main character's motivation from the beginning of the story changes throughout, and it creates a gap between the goal they're pursuing and the events they are experiencing, is it a plot hole? Vincent, I would love to hear your take on this first.
Yeah, definitely. So there's something about motivated character changes and decisions that's a big deal. And how do you do that successfully and have it make sense? Because what you don't want to fall into is creating stereotype characters, or creating characters that are flat and are one note. And so you can often feel like, oh, if I give them this change or this play on things that's different, then I'm adding depth to them as a character. But sometimes all you're doing is subverting the character that you've already built without actually motivating that decision correctly, which is a big mistake. So there's a lot of finesse in making a character that has depth and that isn't flat or one note, but also has those changes and those added, pieces of depth that aren't stereotyped into one pigeonhole. There's a lot of finesse into making sure that that's not out of nowhere or out of the blue. And it can definitely be a plot hole. I thought of a recent movie that I just watched that had this exact problem like 2 days ago.
Which movie? Maybe I've seen it. Huh?
Encanto, the animated.
Encanto. Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Without going to spoilers, that's a movie I felt had that. But
oh, really? But that's really interesting, because I've seen it as well, and I didn't catch it, or maybe I did. And So tell me, what kind of plot hole does it have from your point of view?
Yeah, so it's a very quick movie, which is great, fast paced. But the problem that it runs into is there's a very important character change that happens towards the latter half of the movie, and they don't give it enough time to breathe. They don't show us why that character decides to flip or what really motivated the change. You can infer, and the writers know why. It's just that they assume that you're along for that part of the ride. But at least me as an audience member didn't buy it yet. I needed more time with it. I needed to see more of the why.
Oh, gotcha. It makes sense. Are you referring to the grandma, to
Yeah,
abuela?
exactly. Yes, definitely.
Yeah. It did come off a little bit. It was a bit jarring, wasn't it? The flip.
Personally, yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I can see how that might be a problem. All right, perfect. Thank you. Steven, your take on it. I would love to hear it.
Yeah, so I have not seen Encanto, but I can't answer the question.
Yeah. The question I meant, I meant the
question. I think that when it comes to, I feel like, yes, it can absolutely become a plot hole, as Vincent pointed out, if it's not handled and if it feels rushed. I know that for my book, one of the tricky parts that I ran into was towards the actual end of the book, where in my second draft, there's kind of this big flip that happens, and it didn't feel like there was a setup for it. Suddenly Trinia is just hell-bent on revenge when that hasn't been her motivation the entire time. And so that meant that I needed to start sooner with inferring and implying and building upon this, so that way when it gets to the point she's in a place mentally that she's like, I'm done. Like, I have been pushed to the brink and I'm now over it. And that helped it feel more solidified, because it was a very drastic change in pace from what her initial goals were, which was, I just need to get somebody to stop my father, to then hashtag spoilers being like, I'll do it myself towards the end of the book. And so, yeah, I think that as long as you can lay the foundation early on, that will begin to breadcrumb the way towards something like that. Okay. And then when it happens, the reader can look back at it and go, oh, okay.
It was there.
It was there. I can see it now.
Okay, so the main takeaway, actually I have two takeaways. One is show, don't tell. Is that correct? And the second one is foreshadowing. So in the first draft, at least I feel like there is a plot hole where the motivation from the beginning doesn't really connect to the end goal. I can go back and fix it by if it makes sense for the character, to give those breadcrumbs to the audience. But if it doesn't, then that's the question. What if it doesn't make sense? What if it's just a huge plot hole? Like, what do I do?
Then it's probably going to require a rewrite.
a huge rewrite.
a huge rewrite. And sometimes that happens. Sometimes when we get those plot holes, it's just like, oh crap.
Yeah.
I done did a boo-boo. Because it sounded so good in my head.
Yeah.
But when it gets to the end and you look back and you're like, but there's no way to connect it, then it's like, and what I typically recommend is that, like, if you haven't finished the draft, finish the draft. And then once you finish the draft, look at it and take that step back and go, okay, what's broken? Because then you can identify where in the completed story for that draft that it's broken.
Yeah.
And then once you've identified it, where is it at in the story? If it's in the beginning, then it might be able to be corrected. If it's in the middle, then it's like, that's going to require more. If it's towards the end, then it's like, crap. And then once you've figured that out, then it's like, okay, here's what I need to do. I need to sit down and I need to big brain this outline
Okay.
or rough idea of what has to change in order for it to work. And if it doesn't work, how do I rework the story to either make it work, or do I need to remove it completely?
Okay. Okay, that really helps, because I don't think that it's, in that case, I don't think that it's a plot hole, what's happening in my book. It's finished, and I just noticed, like the first draft, I mean, and I just noticed that there was a motivation clearly defined at the beginning of the book, but as we go, it gradually changes and morphs into something else. And I guess the goal that my character had set out changed as he experienced his life, and he just decides to do something different for himself. So, okay, in that case, it's not a plot hole, but it's a gradual. Yeah, the character evolves in that way. Okay, perfect. Thanks.
Awesome.
Awesome.
And then we'll tackle question number 2 here. So, when writing an ensemble story, how do you make sure the side characters do not create plot holes for the main story? Oh, I want to tackle this one so hard first. So, because I am dealing with this right now. I have a sassy mage who just popped back up out of nowhere. Perfect timing. And then he decides, BT dubs, I'm going to go talk to so-and-so's dad because reasons. I'm like, but why? Why are we doing this, little strange mage man? This is not. What does this have to do with the story?
I'm dead.
And
exactly.
And so it's not that it creates a plot hole in as much as it suddenly makes it's a side quest. It's more of what it feels like. So it doesn't interfere with the main plot as much as it does add to the secondary plot system that I have in place for certain characters.
Okay.
And so that's also something to be careful of and be aware of, is suddenly the side character is not so much creating a plot hole as adding on bulk to the main plot, or a very streamlined side plot, and suddenly
the word count.
And the word count, because inevitably you're going to have to explain in some form why this happened. And this is why that scene very well may not make it into the final draft. But
because I wrote it. Is that not reason enough?
No.
I want to.
I mean, if you want to do that, you're going to end up with a book like this. Like, you're going to end up with Pillars of the Earth. Which is a great book.
Excuse me, Pillars of the Earth, which you're holding.
I haven't read it yet, but I trust your more cultured reading judgment. I'm just the YA guy over here. But yeah, that would be my my hot take on that, is that, with the side characters, they're either going to create a plot hole by doing something they weren't intentionally made to do, or being suddenly like, hey, I am far more interesting than that guy whose story you wanted to write, and whatever. Here's my sudden addition to the storyline.
Yeah, exactly. It felt like you're speaking from my soul. It felt like writing the side quest felt like the Will Smith meme. Like, here's
right.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Yeah. Anyway, sorry, I interrupted you. Go on.
No, but that's seriously, that it's one of those things that you have to be so careful about. And during a first draft, like for those of you guys watching, if you're running into this for a first draft, does not matter at all. In fact, I would encourage you, leave it there until it's done, and then you can go back and see, does it actually work? Does it actually make sense? Does it add to the main story and support it, or is it weighing it down with a density that just doesn't need to be there? And if so, you're going to have to rewrite and reposition that storyline a little bit. But ultimately, can't make that kind of decision until you have actually finished the draft.
Right.
Yeah, because even if your sassy mage side quest only serves a secondary plot, as long as that secondary plot serves the greater, larger character arc and story in some really like actionable, like good way, then that's okay. You know, it can flesh out the story and world build, especially for a genre like fantasy where you have to do that and you have to make it feel alive beyond just the one arc that's happening. So,
Yep,
it would be really valuable.
Okay, so I guess my follow-up question would be, does it have to all the time, like ground rule, expand on the main story, or is it enough if it just world builds or just fleshes out the side characters, if it's purely for making the side characters more like three-dimensional?
Vincent, why don't you tackle that one first?
Yes,
Yeah,
Peter Parker, go ahead.
No, that's great because I have like a chapter like that too that feels like a side quest, and
Okay.
it doesn't have the main character or even like the secondary main characters in it. And I think it's hard to look at it and go, wait, how is this justified for the story? But it flushes out the background of what they're in, and it world builds. It's a world building chapter that without it, things feel just a little less deep, just a little less thought out. And I would argue that if that's what your chapter is doing and it's doing it well, then that is part of making the main arc work. If you're world building successfully with some side character, some side chapter that isn't inherently seeming like it's contributing to the main plot, if it's not creating new problems and it's only adding to the larger narrative and making that more satisfying and enjoyable for readers and making side characters more three-dimensional so that you care more about what happens and how they relate and what they bring out of the main character, then that's great. You know, a three-dimensional side character used well with the main character can only make that main character arc more satisfying. And that's awesome. But then it's about avoiding the pitfalls when you do that kind of stuff, or the pacing issues for me is a big one. Are you detracting from the pacing of the main character arc and making that part a slog?
Yeah, I would agree, and I think the when it comes to the world building aspect, one of the things that I try and incorporate with the world building, and what I recommend readers or authors to do, is that it should impact the characters in some meaningful way in their life. And that is a beautiful way to show world building, because it really avoids the dreaded info dumps that is very narrator based, and it makes it applicable to the character in the moment. So for instance, if you have a flashback, and it's in the city that the main character is in the future, then you give some sort of world building context. And maybe it's like, let's say, just because yours is more of the contemporary feel. So let's say they are opening up a cafe, and it's world building about this cafe and the struggles and the hardships of that cafe. And then later on in the present time, you meet your main character sitting at the cafe, eating the food, completely unaware of the backstory of this, and thinking to themselves, man, this is just a wonderful cafe. And you're like, dang right it is, because they went through some hard crap getting this thing. But it has meaning. And you haven't had to do just like, and you're not doing like, so and so begat 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 so and so main character.
Yeah.
And like that's speaking from
That's
more
a
of like
good
the
point.
fantasy perspective. But if you can interweave it into some tangential way of connecting your character, then it has more impact. Because and this is, I think, one of the things that I've pulled from just the amount of reading that I've done is when people world build and they don't do it right, they're just like, here's a bunch of completely irrelevant information that doesn't pertain at all to the main character or what it is that they're doing.
Yeah.
But I feel like you need to know. And it's like, but I don't.
Okay, so I guess my question is, so when you need to do an exposition and you don't want to do an info dump, but flashback would seem really out of place, how do you stage a scene?
The question that you're showing, the question showing here is that it's an ensemble story.
Yeah.
So some element of this story already is exploring other perspectives, or at least the main character's interactions with a lot of other perspectives. Yeah. So it seems like in this story, it's not going to be out of place to give us some insight into some side event or something that's happening tangentially. So if it's naturally already a part of like the language of the book, then you can use that for the exposition fairly well. And I think of authors like Alif Shafak. I don't know if you guys have heard of.
Oh yeah, yeah.
But there's a lot of characters and a lot of things being balanced, and it's hard to figure out who's even the main focus here. But it works, and you get to the end, and you don't leave with like plot hole, because all these things are interweaving and interlocking together and serving some purpose, like the cafe. You know, if the main character is mean to the manager and you're using that to show us more about the main character being terrible, show us first that the manager is a really good person to add some punch to that. That oh my gosh, yeah, they really suck. They just did that to the beloved manager that we just saw. I don't know.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
It almost seems like Vinny knows what he's talking about.
Yeah, and
yes, thank you. It was great. It was great.
I completely agree with that, because that's the beauty of the ensemble, is that you can showcase multiple different perspectives from multiple timelines, multiple places. But what you as the author have to know is, what is the 50,000 foot picture? What is that thing that encompasses the entirety of the story? That main thread throughout from start to finish. And then how do you interweave the ensemble through that? So that way, one of the things that I love was the show Broadchurch. It stars David Tennant, and it's whoever's doing the most current, the female Doctor Who. I'm forgetting the name. But
I don't know.
David Tennant is
Doctor Who, so
absolutely. David Tennant is just a fantastic actor. And so, but what I loved is that in the opening shot, one of the opening shots of Broadchurch, is they show every single major player that will come across in that season in a single continuous shot as the guy walks down the street.
Oh, a long take. Really? They did a long take. Oh my God. Those are so hard to choreograph and so easy to screw up.
You don't know that all these people are coming into play until you start getting into the season. Yeah. That's what I love about an ensemble.
Yeah.
That is, when you can interweave it like that, that makes for gorgeous storytelling, and it's multi-layered. So if you haven't yet, I highly recommend, if you want to know how to write a really good ensemble, it doesn't matter what genre, go watch Broadchurch and pick it apart, because it is a fantastic murder mystery show. Absolutely fantastic.
Relating that long take concept back to writing in like novel form, that reminds me instantly of like Tolstoy. I think his writing is a long take, because you'll enter a scene following somebody else, and then they're talking to somebody else, and little do you know, the way you're leaving that conversation is with the person they were talking to.
Totally. Yeah.
Oh wait, what?
Exactly. Yeah, it's exactly what I was thinking. Yeah, it's exactly what I was thinking. That's a perfect metaphor. Yeah, I agree. Oh, well, thank you guys. That was awesome. I think that my book is going to go through an awesome revisions edit, and it's going to be amazing. So thank you.
Absolutely. Well, we've enjoyed having you. And any final thoughts or questions before we all go and take a nap? Like, seriously, we should reward ourselves for this amount of hard work.
I'm good on my end.
Vincent, how about for you?
Just as good. Just as good. No questions.
Fantastic. All right, guys. Well, I have loved this. And next week, we're going to be back here doing the same thing again, talking about more revision stuff. I am, again, super excited to be along this journey with you guys. If you have not already, go down, hit the subscribe button, hit the bell notification icon, and we will see you guys next week. Take care, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.